All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to be exploring, well, it's a fascinating topic, really,
Yeah.
at the intersection of religion, architecture, sound, and consciousness.
Wow, that's quite a mouthful.
Well, oh, it is, it is. But I think it'll be really interesting. So we've got some excerpts from a conversation about potential scientific research.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it's exploring these possible connections between ancient religious practices, and how we understand energy and frequency and consciousness
Mm-hmm.
today scientifically. Pretty mind-bending stuff.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the source material, it suggests that these ancient temples, maybe they were more than just places of worship, right?
Oh, okay, so like what? More like tools or something?
Exactly. Tools designed to, well, to interact with, like, the very fabric of reality. It's kind of a wild idea.
So it's like, what if the ancients knew things that we're only now like starting to rediscover?
Yeah, exactly.
Huh? Okay. So let's unpack that a little bit. The sources that we have highlight some really interesting architectural elements that are found in these sacred spaces. We're talking like high ceilings, domes, stained glass, and even the placement of these structures on like ley lines.
You know those energy lines.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And even the use of like the golden ratio and fractal patterns.
It's like, was there more to these designs than just aesthetics? You know?
Exactly.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
So if we try to connect these elements to, our modern understanding of resonance and energy flow, well, we start to see some pretty intriguing possibilities.
Oh, okay. I like where this is going.
For example, you know those high vaulted ceilings and the stained glass windows in Gothic cathedrals?
Mm.
Well, the source suggests that those could actually create these resonant chambers that amplify sound in very specific ways.
Wow.
And it might even influence, get this, brainwave activity.
Okay, now that is food for thought. That's really interesting. But what would be the purpose of like influencing brainwave activity in these spaces?
That's a great question. And, it's a question that researchers are actually exploring right now. Some believe that certain brainwave frequencies are associated with, altered states of consciousness.
Like what kind of altered states?
Well, things like deep meditation or like a heightened awareness. So maybe, just maybe, the architecture of these spaces, it might actually be designed to help people reach those states.
Huh. Fascinating. It really is. And, the source material even goes so far as to suggest that some cathedrals and mosques, they naturally amplify these specific frequencies, like 432 hertz and 528 hertz.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
Yeah. So what's the significance of those frequencies?
Well, that's where we get into some territory that's maybe not as scientifically established.
Oh, okay.
The people who really believe in these frequencies, they claim that they have, like, healing properties.
Yeah.
And that they can influence our well-being in a positive way.
Like physically and emotionally.
Yeah, both. But to be honest, there's not a ton of scientific evidence to back up those claims yet, so it's an area that really needs further investigation.
Yeah, I see. So, okay, we've got these architectural features that could be influencing brain waves, maybe amplifying specific frequencies. It really makes you think about the role of rituals and ceremonies that take place within these sacred spaces.
It does, isn't it?
Could they be more than just symbolic?
That's the big question. I mean, could rituals actually be practical applications of, say, manipulating energy or inducing those specific brainwave states that we talked about? Maybe even interacting with our bioelectric fields.
Okay, let's dive into some examples then. The source mentions, let me see, pagan fire dances. Oh, and Sufi whirling dervishes.
Those are fascinating.
And even, the ritualistic use of water.
Yeah.
So from an energetic perspective, what's going on there?
Okay, let's take the whirling dervishes as an example. So they're spinning. It's known to induce the theta brainwave states.
Theta brainwave states. Okay.
Yeah. Similar to what we see in deep meditation.
Oh, interesting.
And fire dances, right. The heat, the movement, the collective energy of the dance, it could maybe create some kind of charge buildup or, influence the energy field of the people participating.
Huh. It's really fascinating to consider these practices. They're often dismissed as like superstition or whatever, but when you start to look at them through a scientific lens, it makes you wonder, could they actually be based on like a real understanding of energy and its effects on, the human body and mind?
That's what some researchers are beginning to investigate. And this is where sacred symbols come into play. I mean, think about how often you see geometric and mathematical patterns in religious traditions all over the world.
Oh, yeah, like mandalas, hexagrams, spirals, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're definitely visually striking.
They are. But some researchers believe they might be more than just pretty pictures. you know?
Oh, okay. Interesting. Like,
Yeah.
what else could they be?
Well, the source refers to them as mental tuning devices. It's like maybe they can influence consciousness, or even, and this is where it gets really interesting, maybe they reflect some deeper structure of reality itself.
Okay, now we're venturing into some, like, really deep territory here.
Hmm.
So the source mentions quantum consciousness theories. Could you maybe explain those a bit more and how they might relate to these ancient mystical traditions?
Sure. So quantum consciousness theories, they propose that consciousness isn't just a product of the brain, but like a fundamental aspect of reality itself. And it might even influence how matter behaves at the subatomic level. It's pretty mind-blowing. And, some believe that those ancient mystical traditions, they might have actually been early expressions of this very understanding. Like they were already hinting at this deep connection between the observer and the observed.
So what you're suggesting is that ancient religions, maybe they weren't just about, faith and dogma,
Yeah.
but they could have been early, like, intuitive forms of science.
Right. Like they were exploring the very nature of reality, but in a different way.
Huh. That's a really compelling idea.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating is that modern science, it seems like it's starting to catch up with some of these ancient intuitions.
Yeah, definitely. And the source even suggests some specific experiments, ways to actually test these connections.
Oh, okay. I'm all ears. What kind of experiments are we talking about?
Well, there's a range. Some involve measuring biofield fluctuations in sacred spaces, analyzing the effects of chanting on brainwaves, and even exploring how rituals might affect things like, biological markers of aging. It's all very early stage research, of course. But the implications, well, they're pretty mind-boggling.
Now, you mentioned measuring biofield fluctuations. Can you
Okay.
break that down a little? What exactly is a biofield, and how would you even go about measuring fluctuations in something like that?
Okay, so the biofield, it's this concept that describes like a subtle energy field that surrounds and like permeates living organisms. Some people call it an aura or chi. But measuring those fluctuations, that's the tricky part. One way they suggest using sensitive magnetometers
Magnetometers, okay.
to detect variations in the electromagnetic fields around the body.
So, like, if somebody was meditating in a cathedral, could you actually see a change in their electromagnetic field using these magnetometers?
That's the idea. You'd take readings inside the cathedral and then compare those to readings taken somewhere else, like maybe an office building, for contrast. And if there's a big difference, well, it might suggest that the sacred space is actually influencing the person's biofield.
Wow, that's really something. But are there other ways to measure these subtle energy effects?
Oh, definitely. The source also talks about biophoton emission.
Biophoton emission, okay.
So this refers to it's this ultra-weak light that living organisms emit.
We emit light.
It's very faint. But the idea is that the structure of this light, it changes based on the person's health and coherence, I guess you could say.
So, like, if someone's meditating in a Buddhist temple,
Yeah.
their biophoton emissions might look different compared to when they're just, like, hanging out in their living room.
Exactly. And if researchers could actually link being in a sacred space to changes in those emissions, it would support the idea that these environments have a real measurable impact on our energy fields.
Okay, so we've got electromagnetic fields, biophotons. What else is there?
The SORT material mentions something called gas discharge visualization.
Gas discharge visualization. What's that?
It's also called GDV imaging. And basically, it creates these images of the energy field or aura around a person's body.
Wait, are we talking about those, like, colorful images you sometimes see in New Age shops?
Yeah, exactly those. Now, GDV imaging, it's still a bit controversial scientifically,
I can see why.
but some researchers believe that it can actually provide some valuable insight into a person's energy field and how it changes in response to different environments or practices.
So you could use this GDV imaging to see if, like, the size or structure of someone's aura changes when they're in a sacred space or doing some kind of spiritual practice.
That's the idea.
Wow, that's really fascinating.
It is. And it gets even more interesting when we start thinking about sound and chanting.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, how those might affect our energy fields and consciousness.
I'm definitely ready to dive into that. Tell me more about, like, what the research possibilities are there.
Okay, so one area that's being explored is something called brainwave entrainment. So they could use EEG,
Yeah.
electroencephalography,
Uh-huh.
to measure brainwave activity while someone's listening to Gregorian chants, for example. or participating in a chanting ritual.
So they can actually see how these sounds are impacting brainwave patterns in real time.
Exactly. The theory is that these sounds, they might be able to shift brainwave patterns into states that are linked to deep relaxation, meditation, or even those heightened awareness states we talked about earlier.
This reminds me of something else the source mentions. The potential for these practices to actually trigger the release of DMT in the brain.
Oh, right.
DMT, that's a powerful psychedelic, right?
Yeah. It is naturally produced in the pineal gland, and it's thought to play a role in dreaming and those, altered states of consciousness.
So it's like if they could prove that chanting or meditation actually increases DMT production, that'd be a pretty big deal, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It would suggest that these practices aren't just affecting us psychologically, but they're actually changing our brain chemistry in pretty profound ways.
Wow. And if you connect that back to the architecture, it raises even more questions, doesn't it?
It does. It's like maybe the architecture itself is working together with the rituals and practices to create a very specific energetic environment. The source mentioned something called cymatics.
Cymatics, what is that?
It's the study of how sound waves actually create visible patterns in matter.
Oh, wow.
So some researchers think that the people who built these ancient structures, they understood these principles. And they used them to design those sacred spaces so they would resonate with certain frequencies. Like, imagine a cathedral that was designed to amplify the effects of chanting and ritual through its very structure. Pretty amazing, right?
So you're saying that ancient cultures, they might have had this deep understanding of energy and frequency and consciousness. And that they actually encoded that knowledge into their religious practices in these sacred spaces.
It's a fascinating possibility.
It is.
And if we could scientifically validate even a fraction of these ideas, it would totally change how we view history, spirituality, our place in the universe.
It's like, imagine a world where we could use these principles to improve our health, well-being, tap into deeper states of consciousness.
It would be a revolution.
It would. But let's pause here for a second and take a breath.
Yeah, good idea.
We've covered a lot of ground, from architecture to the potential of rituals to like the mind-blowing idea that consciousness might be fundamental to the universe.
It's a lot to take in.
We'll pick up right where we left off after a quick break. Okay, so we're back and ready to keep going down this rabbit hole of energy, consciousness, and ancient practices. Before the break, we were talking about the idea that ancient cultures might have intentionally designed those sacred spaces to resonate with specific frequencies, like they were using cymatics. And I'm really curious about how researchers could actually test that idea.
Well, you could imagine researchers setting up microphones and cameras inside a cathedral and then, playing different frequencies.
To see how they interact with the space.
Exactly. They could observe how those sound patterns, how they form, and see if certain frequencies create particularly strong or unique resonances.
So they could actually visualize those sound waves shaping the energy of the cathedral. That would be incredible to see.
Yeah, it would be. And they could even go further, They could use something called water crystallization studies.
Water crystallization studies.
Yeah. Have you heard of those?
I haven't. No. What are those?
So it's this technique where researchers expose water to different sounds or intention.
Intentions?
Yeah, it's a little out there. And then they freeze the water and look at the patterns that form in the ice crystals.
Oh, wow.
The idea is that different frequencies or intentions might create different patterns, some really beautiful ones, too.
So, okay. If they played those specific frequencies we talked about earlier, like the 432 hertz and 528 hertz, inside a cathedral, and then use that water for the crystallization, they could see if those frequencies make, particularly harmonious or complex patterns in the ice.
Exactly.
Oh,
and imagine if they found that those same frequencies also correlated with, say, positive changes in brainwave activity or biophoton emissions in people.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Right. It would suggest this deep connection between sound, matter, and consciousness. It would really lend credence to the idea that these spaces were designed with a profound understanding of those principles.
It's a really mind-expanding concept.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about, what we could do if we rediscovered and harnessed this ancient wisdom in a modern context.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Think about it. What if we could design buildings that enhance our well-being, create music that promotes healing, or, develop new forms of meditation that help us access deeper states of consciousness. It's like we could combine the wisdom of those ancient traditions with our modern scientific understanding to create a kind of, I don't know, technology of consciousness.
That's a powerful idea. It suggests that these ancient practices weren't just about, spirituality or religion,
Yeah.
but they were also about understanding and working with, like, those subtle energies that shape our reality.
Precisely. It challenges us to rethink how we view the past. To see these ancient cultures as potentially possessing this sophisticated understanding of energy and consciousness that we're only just beginning to rediscover now.
It's like maybe we've been looking at these traditions through the wrong lens. Like, we focused on the outward rituals and symbols, but we didn't really grasp the deeper scientific principles that might be at play.
Right. And it raises another question. If we've lost touch with this ancient wisdom, what else have we forgotten? What other lost sciences might be out there just waiting to be rediscovered and integrated into our understanding of the world?
It's a humbling thought. It really suggests that we still have so much to learn from the past, and that our current scientific paradigm, well, maybe it's only scratching the surface of what's truly possible.
Yeah, it's an invitation to approach these ancient traditions with curiosity and respect, recognizing that they might hold valuable insights into the nature of reality and our place within it.
That's beautifully said. But, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. We've been talking a lot about the potential benefits, these mind-blowing implications of this research. But what if these experiments don't actually prove anything? What if they don't find any measurable evidence to support these theories?
Well, that's always a possibility, right? I mean, that's part of scientific research. But even if the initial experiments don't give us the results we're hoping for, it doesn't mean the underlying ideas are wrong. Maybe we just need to refine our methods, try different approaches, or consider some alternative explanations.
So even a negative result could actually be valuable,
Yeah.
for guiding future research.
Exactly. Science is all about asking questions, testing those hypotheses, and being open to unexpected findings. And even if we don't find definitive proof of these concepts, the very act of investigating them can expand our knowledge and challenge those assumptions we have about the world.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It reminds us that science is a journey. It's not about reaching a specific destination. But, okay, let's say, just for the sake of argument, that these experiments do confirm, the existence of these subtle energies and their influence on consciousness. What would that mean, practically? How could we use that knowledge to improve our lives and the world around us?
That's where things get really exciting, I think. If we can actually understand those principles behind those ancient practices, we might be able to apply them in a modern context
Yeah.
to create, I don't know, a more harmonious and fulfilling existence for ourselves and future generations.
Okay, I'm really eager to hear about those potential applications. Like, where do we even begin to imagine the possibilities?
Well, imagine architects and designers using this knowledge to create buildings that not only meet our physical needs, but they also support our emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. It's like we could see the emergence of sacred architecture, spaces that incorporate principles of resonance, energy flow, biophilic design, to create places that promote healing, creativity, connection.
That's a beautiful vision. It would be incredible to live and work in spaces that were intentionally designed to enhance our well-being. But it sounds a little like something out of a utopian science fiction novel.
Maybe. But what seems like science fiction today could be scientific reality tomorrow, right? And think about it. This isn't just limited to architecture. Imagine musicians composing music that entrains brainwaves into beneficial states, like music that promotes relaxation, focus, or even, those altered states of consciousness we've been talking about.
So instead of listening to music for entertainment, we could be using it as a tool for personal growth and transformation. It's
It,
amazing.
it really opens up a whole new realm of possibilities.
It does. And, we could even imagine healthcare practitioners using these principles,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
like therapies that use sound, light, and energy to promote healing and well-being. So we could complement those traditional medical approaches with a more holistic understanding of, what it means to be human.
Right, exactly.
It sounds like we could revolutionize our approach to health and wellness by integrating this ancient wisdom with modern science. That's an incredible thought.
It is. And we can't forget about the impact this could have on our understanding of consciousness itself. If these experiments confirm that consciousness isn't just a product of the brain, but it's a fundamental aspect of reality, that would completely change how we see ourselves and our place in the universe.
Yeah, it would suggest that we're not just passive observers. We're active participants in the creation of reality. Like our thoughts, intentions, beliefs, they actually have a measurable impact on the world around us.
Exactly. It would empower us to take responsibility for our own consciousness and to recognize that interconnectedness of all things.
It's a powerful message of hope and responsibility. But before we get too carried away with all these possibilities, let's bring this back to the present moment for a second. We've explored some pretty fascinating concepts, some mind-blowing implications, but we need to acknowledge that, we have limitations in our current knowledge, and it's important to approach this with a healthy dose of skepticism, some critical thinking.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. It's crucial to balance our enthusiasm with a discerning mind. We don't want to jump to conclusions or accept claims without, sufficient evidence. Science is all about testing hypotheses, gathering that data, and being open to revising our understanding as new information comes to light.
So while it's definitely exciting to think about the potential of these ideas, we also need to stay grounded in the rigor of scientific inquiry and avoid falling into the trap of, just wishful thinking.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between open-mindedness and critical thinking. We need to be willing to explore those new possibilities, but also maintain that healthy skepticism and demand evidence to support those possibilities.
Well said. On that note, let's take a short break to gather our thoughts. And when we come back, we'll wrap up this deep dive by considering the ethical implications of this research. And we'll explore some final, provocative thoughts for you all to ponder. And we're back, diving deep into this fascinating world where science and spirituality kind of like converge. And it's been quite a journey so far.
It has. We've been through ancient architecture, consciousness, the potential of lost sciences. It's a lot.
It is. And before we, wrap up this whole deep dive, I think we should touch on something really important, the ethics of it all. We've talked about all these amazing advancements that could come from this research, but what about the potential downsides? What are the pitfalls we need to be aware of?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, with any kind of scientific advancement, you have to think about the potential for misuse or unintended consequences. Like, what if we find out that certain frequencies or specific ways of designing buildings can actually influence people's consciousness? We need to be incredibly careful with that knowledge.
Yeah, I can see how that could be a problem. Like, what if someone uses this knowledge to, I don't know, manipulate people, control them without their consent? That could have huge implications for, individual freedom, people's autonomy.
Exactly. We need to make sure that any knowledge we gain from this is used ethically and responsibly, with a lot of thought given to how it might affect individuals and society as a whole. I think it's essential to have open discussions about the ethics of all of this right from the start and to come up with some clear guidelines for how it can be applied.
So it's like we almost neared a whole new ethical framework, one specifically designed to guide the development and use of these potentially powerful technologies. We really don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. There have been times when scientific advances have been used for harmful purposes. We don't want to do that again.
I couldn't agree more. We have to learn from history, and we have to proceed with caution, making sure that these discoveries, if they happen, are used to benefit humanity, not to exploit or control it.
That's a really important point. It's like knowledge is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
It can be used for good or it can be used for harm. And ultimately, it's our responsibility to ensure that it's used wisely.
Absolutely. And I think it's a reminder that scientific progress should always go hand in hand with ethical considerations. It's not just about asking, can we do this, but also should we do this and what might happen if we do?
So as we stand on the verge of these potentially groundbreaking discoveries, it's essential to move forward with a combination of enthusiasm and caution. We need to be guided by this deep respect for the power of the knowledge that we're uncovering.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. It's an exciting time for science, but it's also a time for deep reflection, for ethical awareness.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We spent this whole time exploring the idea that maybe, just maybe, ancient cultures had this incredibly sophisticated understanding of energy, frequency, and even consciousness itself. If that's true, it really makes us question everything we think we know about the nature of reality and our place within it.
Right. It's an invitation to look back at the wisdom of the past and not see it as something old-fashioned or irrelevant, but as something that could hold these really profound insights that could help us navigate the complexities of the world today and maybe even help us create a better future.
It reminds us that we're all connected. We're part of this vast web of life, and our thoughts, our intentions, our actions, they all have an impact. And that impact reaches far beyond just ourselves.
And maybe, just maybe, by rediscovering and integrating those ancient insights with what we know today, we can unlock some incredible new possibilities for healing, for growth, for transformation, for everyone, really.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this incredible journey. It's been a truly deep dive into the mysteries of consciousness and the potential of ancient wisdom to guide us forward.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And, until next time, keep your minds open and never stop questioning the world around you.